Hey everyone, Kathy the Vegan Prepper here, and today we're going to be discussing how to cook without eggs. Let's get right into it. Vegan prepper. Vegan prepper. Whatever reason you find yourself here on this video, whether you're looking for necessity because of a newly discovered egg allergy, or you are newly vegan or plant-based, or if you are just looking to bolster your preparedness by learning how to cook without an ingredient that you typically rely upon, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here, no matter what the reason. My hope, my desire, my prayer is to alleviate suffering by giving this information to as many people as can get their hands on it. So I know that we're possibly entering times where people might be losing their access to eggs. So I'm really making this video kind of with non-vegans more in mind, but obviously if you are vegan, you're still welcome to watch. But whether it will be because you can't access them or because the prices will skyrocket so much that you won't be able to obtain them. Also, even if you can obtain them, yeah, like if you can funnel some of your dollars into some other food and figure out how to live your life without needing eggs, and sort of increase your own food security for your family and your loved ones, then I think this is some great information to have. I think it's a great time to begin testing and learning how to cook, how to do some recipes, maybe without the eggs, before you necessarily have to be armed with the information in advance. I think it's just good preparedness. It's just wise. It's wisdom. I think it's just practical. It's common sense. I remember making the suggestion at some point on a certain video, and I can't remember what it was. It was another prepper I saw talking about getting everybody set up with backyard chickens, and I'm just not going to talk. I'm not here to talk against it or whatever because, you know, obviously I am vegan, so that's not going to be something that I'm doing. But I made that suggestion, and I basically said essentially that this is wisdom, it's common sense to figure out how to do it now, and this is not just because I'm vegan, it's so that you can alleviate your suffering and prepare in advance for something that may be coming. And I got so much hate on that. I got like throw up face emojis and all of that, and genuinely here you can see my eyes, even if I'm not here. Hopefully you can hear it in my voice, you can hear it in my heart that I care about people, and I do not want people suffering. And so that's why I'm sharing this information, not because I'm trying to like get everybody to go vegan in some backhanded way, okay? All right, all that being said, let's get into the actual information. Let's talk about replacing eggs in your meals. I'm talking about meals that are heavily based on egg, or like egg is the meal. So things like scrambled eggs. So my first replacement for that would be tofu scramble. It is possible to make it really good. I know some people hear tofu and then they think, you know, throw up face emoji, right? Like that's exactly what you think of. But honestly, it can be so delicious. I mean, you put it into like a little tortilla with some greens and some potatoes and some hot sauce, and you have yourself a breakfast burrito of just epicness. Like, it is so good. In fact, I've seen it happen before at church. I've brought them like a whole tray of tofu scrambled burritos, and I label everything with all the ingredients inside because we have allergies in our house. I want to make sure that everybody knows what's in the food that I bring, just as a courtesy. And so it's funny, you can like literally see people kind of go, oh, never mind, until one person, it was just so funny. Like one time I brought them one person who's kind of more popular in the church, he got his hands on one just like to try it because he's also really adventurous and fun. That's probably why he's so popular. And he got it and he loved it. And then he suddenly loaded his plate down with like 5, and then he went and he told everybody about it, and then everybody came and got it and loved it. And then the next time I brought tofu scrambled burritos for the Bible study brunch one Sunday, they disappeared like that. Before anything else that anyone else brought, mine were gone because people remembered how good they were. Look, I'm not vegan because I don't remember what good food tastes like. I do. It's good. So anyway, it can be delicious. So it's just, again, trying to give you some hope that it can be really delicious. Another really great choice is Just Egg. The product Just Egg. It comes in a little plastic bottle. It looks yellow. It is vegan. It is very similar to scrambled eggs, like so similar. Honestly, the first time I tasted it, I was a little weirded out. But it is quite delicious. That would be for kind of the die-hard egg person. You might be able to get away with something with that, especially if you dress it up in like burrito form with some hash browns and something like that. And so I have not personally tried cooking it in like little circular egg things. Actually, way back before I was vegan, I used to have the English muffin molds, and for our breakfasts and breakfast sandwiches, I would cook an egg in the English muffin mold to make like a sandwich thing. And so I haven't tried that yet with the Just Egg, but I kind of want to see, you know, how it will do. But anyway, that's just a tip you might be able to use for yourself. For things like omelets, I would say again, the Just Egg would be a great thing for that, but also omelets and things made with chickpea flour and also mung dal. I'll put it on the screen. That's split mung bean. That is actually what Just Egg is based off of, but people make a lot of really delicious egg-like things from chickpea flour and the mung dal, but I'll say they do taste like almost a little bit more like a bread than an egg, just so that you know, but they're still really good. For the whites of hard-boiled eggs in something like potato salad or tuna salad, but we do chickpea salad, I'll do cubes of extra firm tofu, which I will mix in just barely at the absolute very end of the recipe because it can like completely fall apart. But if you want the little chunks left, like almost like little tiny pieces of hard-boiled egg, mix them in super gently at the very end, and you'll have something that looks and has kind of the mouth feel of like the egg white of a hard-boiled egg. For a fried egg, weirdly enough, now I haven't tried the Just Egg in this capacity, but I have done, honestly, my favorite thing is just tofu again. You just take thin slices of tofu, pan fry them in a tiny bit of like olive oil or something, and then you have yourself something that tastes pretty much exactly like a fried egg. It's really weird. This was one that was an accident for us. Adam came home from running. I hadn't gotten anything made yet. I usually try to have breakfast ready for him when he comes home from his training runs. I think I was gone, and I showed up shortly after he showed up. He showed up a lot earlier than we thought he would. He was making himself just as a quick thing just to go on some bread, some pan-fried pieces of tofu. And then when he started eating it, he like was looking at it and he went, "Taste this," and he came over and he handed it to me and I ate it, and it was like, oh my gosh, it tastes like a fried egg, like in a McDonald's breakfast sandwich, you know, like you would get like that fried egg taste. And ever since then we've done that, and when we want a fried egg, that's what we do. It's just like a little thin slice of tofu with like a little bit of olive oil. We're not typically too heavy on the oil in our house, but every now and then you want that specific taste, and it just works. It's really weird, but yeah, it just works. For things like egg bakes and quiche, again, I think people do use the Just Egg for that. I've never done that before myself yet. But again, chickpea flour recipes, you can make really good like chickpea bites and quiches. I've done that before with this recipe that I have made that I've also not posted yet, and I need to get posted. But they're really quite good. I would not say that it tastes like egg, but especially in like a quiche pan form with like the pie crust and everything, you totally get like the experience of it, and it's really good. And so it's definitely a great replacement, and it's like if you have the right attitude, you can really enjoy it. So all right, next we're going to talk about replacing eggs in recipes. For replacing eggs in recipes, it's good to remember that there's usually one of three reasons that the eggs are present in the recipe to begin with as far as baking goes. Typically to either bind, lift, or add moisture. So looking at those three things, those three actions that the eggs kind of perform in recipes, and then sort of applying some like critical thinking, a little bit of sleuthing when you're looking at your recipe, trying to figure out why is this egg here? That can help inform how you will replace it. Because to simply say, oh, just throw in a quarter cup of applesauce for every egg, well, that would cover moisture, but it doesn't cover binding or lifting. So it's like you have to kind of think about it in those terms. I will say, and I will be discussing all of that in just a second, but I will say for cookies specifically, I don't know what it is, something about the chemistry of cookies. I haven't really ever made good, just like regular egg replacements in cookies until I started using this stuff. It's just very good, like natural ingredients. It just has potato starch, tapioca flour, baking soda, and psyllium husk. That's all that's in here. No weirdness, no nothing. It's just good, and it's gluten-free and all of that. So this is a great one to have specifically for cookies. I will also say that I am working on perfecting a convenience jar recipe as we speak for blueberry muffins, throwing some of this in there so that basically all you have to do is add plant milk, ideally no oil, but maybe a little bit of oil, and then bake it and boom, you have muffins. So that is potentially coming up in a future convenience jar recipe. But I thought I would throw that out there, not as a tease, but sort of as like something to maybe get your wheels turning, that maybe you can create some shelf stable muffin or quick bread type mixes, maybe even cookie mixes, and see if they would work using some of this stuff. So it's just an idea. Now, it's not something that I would say would be shelf stable for like a really long time. This does not have a massively long shelf life. It's like a year or two, but still it's something that you could try, and why not? We're preppers. Let's experiment, let's figure it out and have some fun. Okay, but so let's go ahead and talk about, again, replacing eggs in recipes. And so, yeah, and oh, also, there's actually plenty of cookie recipes out there that just simply don't use eggs, especially vegan ones. And I thought I would cover that too really fast. Rather than going through trying to make recipes you already have vegan, it can work to sort of just surf the internet and find recipes that are already vegan, so that you don't have to adapt anything. It's just already there. So I'm gonna link down below, for instance, the Pick Up Limes 1 bowl soft chocolate chip cookies recipe, which is just delicious. We make that. That's like our standard cookie recipe, and they are so good. And every single person who has ever eaten them says they are so good. And that's not, I'm not taking credit for that. That was Sadia over at Pick Up Limes. She's a genius. But it's just a fantastic recipe. And so that would be a great one for learning how to bake. And it has no milk. It just uses coconut oil, so no butter, and then no eggs. So definitely good one to have in your repertoire for baking without some of your most used ingredients, if you still use those ingredients. Okay, so now to cover binding, most people are familiar with flax and chia eggs, or flax eggs. Most people don't really think about chia eggs because we don't really talk about that. But for a flax egg, you basically typically will take, well, most people will say, take 1 tablespoon of ground flax to 3 tablespoons of water. I do 2 tablespoons of flax to 3 tablespoons of water. And I haven't ever noticed any bad effects from adding that little extra bit of flax. I just find it seems like stuff doesn't bind together very well unless you add that little extra bit of flax, and then it works really well. I will say too, just in case you aren't familiar with the measurements, most large eggs are about 1/4 cup in volume. So that's why typically it says 1 tablespoon plus 3 tablespoons of water. That's about 1/4 cup. And again, I haven't ever noticed anything bad from just adding that other tablespoon of the flax. But in that particular thing, if you make a flax egg or a chia egg, you are replacing both binding and moisture at the same time, because you're adding that extra moisture like when you're making your little egg thing. For a chia egg, I'm gonna stop using air quotes because you know what I'm saying. So for a chia egg, I should make that the thumbnail of the video. Do 1 tablespoon of ground chia seed to 3 tablespoons of water. Chia is much more binding than flaxseed is. However, it also kind of discolors the recipes a bit more. So I don't know, and I don't know why people don't use it as often. I personally find it like better than a flax egg personally. But I think it's just flax eggs are what most people use. And so that's just what they do. But I will take as a note for if you're making it out of ground chia. So I just have like a dedicated spice grinder where I grind spices, and then I also will grind my flax and I'll grind my chia seeds. And so put your chia seeds, your 1 tablespoon of chia seed or whatever, into your little bowl, have a little whisk. As you're pouring the water in, be whisking that chia egg, okay? Do not let the chia sit for even like a second in the water. Do it right away, or else you'll just basically end up with a horrible little lump and it won't do anyone any good. So that's kind of the one thing with the chia. Maybe that's partly why people don't use it, because it's a little fiddly. But like basically, as long as you do that, it's fine. Like it's not fiddly if you just mix it. Okay, it's fine. But one of the other things, like a question I used to have is it even necessary to make the egg? I said no more air quotes. Is it even necessary to do the egg, quote unquote, of sorry, like no more air quotes, so I'll just say it instead. Is it even necessary to turn the flax and chia into the egg before you start cooking? The answer is not really, for a lot of things. So like I was mentioning my muffin type recipe experiment, you can make mixes, and I do. In fact, I have some mixes on the channel. My whole wheat vegan Pancake mix just uses flax in the mix, and then you don't have to make a separate egg. You just create, you just add your plant milk or whatever, and whatever flavoring or blueberries or chocolate chips or whatever you want, and then you just make your pancakes out of it without even adding anything else. It's super handy. And so there's a lot of stuff like that. Like you can just add it in to your dry ingredients and then maybe add a little extra liquid when you pour your liquid in, and then you're golden. Like you don't have to mix the egg part first, unless it is something like they're wanting you to beat the egg into, say, the sugar or something like for a cookie. But again, I have never really been super pleased with flax and chia eggs in cookies and how they did. So I don't know. But anyway, you sort of have to, again, it's like using your critical thinking to really look at the recipe and your common sense kind of, and just sort of puzzle through it and figure it out. And then, you know, you should be fine. Ultimately, it is baking, and it isn't life or death, right? So we get to learn in a more relaxed state how to do this. And I think, again, it's a major advantage. So to achieve lift, oh no, never mind. Let me say one more thing about the binding and the flax and the chia egg is that I wouldn't replace much more than like 1 or maybe 2 eggs in a recipe with a flax or chia egg. If I have a recipe that's calling for, you know, say 4 eggs, again, this is like old, if I'm adapting old recipes, I will do maybe 2 chia or flax eggs, and then I'll add like a little bit of this to replace some of the extra egg. That's just to sort of, again, make this stretch further, because it's kind of hard to find. It can be kind of hard to find. It can be a little bit pricey. But also just because for whatever reason, it's just sort of, it doesn't really work to do like too much flax or too much chia into your recipe. So sort of keep that in mind. Okay, for the lift. Lift can be achieved through, you know, typical means in a recipe. Basically baking soda, baking powder typically will achieve your lift. If you want to add a little extra lift because you've taken some egg out and you're replacing it maybe with like a flax or a chia egg, that will cover your, again, that will cover your moisture and your binding. And then to cover maybe a little bit of lift, to sort of give a bit of an extra reaction, you could add a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar or lemon juice, like not both at the same time. I'm just saying it would be apple cider vinegar or lemon juice to, say, a cup of your plant milk. So about 1 teaspoon per cup. It doesn't really change the flavor of anything. Like I've never tasted a flavor difference in you know, a batch of cookies or like a cake or muffins, or, you know, a recipe that's a decent size is not going to be, the flavor's not going to change with the addition of 1 teaspoon of apple cider vinegar or lemon juice or whatever. So that can just create, that extra bit of acid will create a little bit of an extra reaction from the baking soda. I have also read that you can add like maybe 1/8 to 1/4 teaspoon extra of baking soda into your recipe to sort of give yourself a little bit more of that lift. I don't usually do that. Typically, I find that the teaspoon of apple cider vinegar or lemon juice is enough to give that lift in your recipe. But if you want to go ahead and experiment further by adding also a little bit of that extra baking soda, go right ahead. I would just say go ahead and mix the dry and wet ingredients separately, and then have your pans ready to go, like especially if you're going to do muffins, have them already lined, have everything ready to go so that when you mix the dry and the wet together, it's that acid reacting with that baking soda or that baking powder that is going to create that lift reaction. And if you let it sit for too long, it's going to fizzle right back down and you're going to basically lose it. So basically what you're wanting to do is mix it and then get it into the oven as quickly as possible at that point, so that you can get that great lift without losing the reaction. So hopefully that makes sense. So that will cover the lift aspect of the eggs. And so like I said, typically I'll just add like a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar into the milk, do my flax egg, and boom, there we go. Eggs are covered now. For the moisture, honestly, I don't find it to be that big of a deal to be replacing moisture, especially if you're doing it with the flax egg or the chia egg, and that is already replacing moisture. And especially if your recipe has oils in it, you're gonna have moisture. I haven't really ever run into dryness problems. In fact, typically what I run into is like like they're overly wet. And so that is something to be concerned about. Actually, sometimes I'll cut the water back with the flax and the chia. I'll add only enough moisture to cover, say, 1 flax egg or chia egg, to try to mitigate some of that moisture. So that's something to keep in mind. So because if you think about it, eggs are a moisture when they go in, but when they cook, they solidify. And so that's obviously not going to happen with water. Water does not solidify. So you have to be a little bit careful sometimes. That's another reason why I say don't replace much more than 1 or 2 eggs of the flax and chia in your recipe, because you might end up with like way too much moisture. But at this point, also another way to combat that possibly is to maybe use applesauce instead of water, so you can kind of thicken your batter and sweeten it a little bit at the same time. So you can do your flax or your chia in the dried amount, maybe into your dry ingredients, and then as your extra moisture for that quote unquote egg, I just did it again, I did both, for the egg, add in like 3 tablespoons or so of applesauce instead of just water, and then that can make it a little thicker, and then it might not get as like gummy, because sometimes vegan stuff can get kind of gummy if you just put a little bit too much liquid in. So it's just something to keep in mind. You can use like pumpkin instead too. And then the final thing, or the last thing to talk about, is Aquafaba. So I'm just gonna ask about Aquafaba. I have not personally used it myself. So Aquafaba, in case you're like, what on earth is that? Every single time I hear Aquafaba, I think Aquafina. And I'm not talking about the drink, I'm talking about the actress. But basically, Aquafaba is the liquid left behind in a can of chickpeas. And so for your baking purposes, you would ideally or probably need to be using no salt added chickpeas. Get the liquid, you can whip it up. It whips up into egg whites. I mean, Google it. It's kind of crazy. So that is a really great replacement for whipped egg white in a recipe. So we're talking about things like mousses, macarons, meringues, things that really rely upon an egg white beaten in order to create their texture. And I just, like my kitchen's simple. Okay. My kitchen's a down home, simple kitchen. We do eat, like, I do cook a lot of Indian food, but I consider that down home cooking too, honestly, because it's just down home cooking like from a different country, but it's still very like simple and good, nourishing, hearty food. But it's just, very simple. I don't get into like super fancy, troublesome, kind of highfalutin stuff. I don't really do that, although I gotta say I do really miss macarons. So if I ever do try Aquafaba for myself, it will be to make vegan macarons. But I haven't personally tried it, so I can't really give you tips, but I will add it to the list regardless so that you can do your own research, especially if one of those things is like a really big deal to you and you really want to be able to replace that in one of your recipes. Also, I do know, for instance, Rainbow Plant Life, she has some recipes where she uses Aquafaba whipped up into peaks as what she mixes into her dough or into her batter. I think her pumpkin bread recipe uses whipped Aquafaba to give it lift and give it airiness like whipped egg whites, and lightness and all of that. So anyway, just thought I'd mention the Aquafaba, even though I haven't used it, so you can kind of look into it. I will say, also, apparently, if you whip a small, and I'll go look up the ratio and I'll put it on the screen, a small amount of cream of tartar into your Aquafaba, then you will retain those peaks and they are not going to go away. I learned that from America's Test Kitchen. So I don't remember the ratios, but I have it and I'll go find it and put it on the screen, like I said. So that is a great thing to have in your arsenal as well, to remember a little bit of cream of tartar, and then the peaks won't fall and they won't like separate again. And so final thoughts, sometimes you can just simply leave eggs out and like nothing happens. So that's another thing that you could try. See, the worst that can happen, just leave an egg out and see, maybe it'll be fine. Totally fine, right? So there's a lot of vegan baking recipes when you look around that like don't really replace the egg at all. Like they just sort of are. And like that cookie recipe I was talking about is a great example of that. It's just a great recipe without there being any, specific replacement or anything like a flax or whatever. And so that is definitely a possibility. But yeah, if you're trying to figure out how to replace eggs in some of your tried and true recipes, then hopefully any of this information was helpful at all. And I guess just let me know in the comments down below if you have anything to add. Those of you who are more experienced than I am, who have more things to say about egg replacements and all of that, please leave the information down in the comments below so all of us can glean from that. And I guess that's it for me today. As always, I hope the rest of your day is good and your life stays wonderful. Thank you so much for watching. See you later. Bye.